Here we go, Donkey Kong Country 4. Now I've covered pirate gaming in the past, so on this episode I'll refrain from talking about the pirate industry and save a more expanded version of that for my pirate gaming special. Instead I'd like to talk about the Donkey Kong Country series itself. The first console I ever really had was an SNES, and so like many others I had the first Donkey Kong Country. I think back then, before the games industry was about shoving out product just to shove out a product, I took the game for granted, just assuming that every Nintendo platform game ever was always going to be great. I mean, games like Yoshi's Island and Super Mario World seem to point to that conclusion, and Donkey Kong Country even had two great SNES sequels itself. And yes, Donkey Kong Country 3 is a great game. Whoever started the rumor that it sucks doesn't know what he or she is talking about. But I digress. Now, having played Donkey Kong Country Returns, I realized just how great the first game in particular was. The gameplay, the graphics, the characters, the music, the atmosphere in general is all perfect. I love this game. So beautiful. But anyway, you might imagine I was instantly intrigued when I saw the name Donkey Kong Country 4, and even more intrigued when I found out that it is actually a Famicom remake of the first game with heavily altered levels. So much so that it really seems like it was more just inspired by it than anything. Alright, all this being said, let's take a look. First, let's take a look at this. Already, just from the opening sequence, we can tell that the graphics and music are going above and beyond your usual pirate shovelware. I mean, even for a licensed game, these graphics wouldn't be half bad, and considering the source material's graphics were wireframe based, I find this all the more impressive. Starting the game, we'll encounter the first cut feature, the area submap. Instead, we'll be staying on the island map and be given a world level readout a la Super Mario Bros. And I suppose this would be a good time to talk about the other cut features, of which there are very few that come to mind. The biggest one, I guess, would be the unsurprising lack of battery-backed memory. Instead, there's a password system which I actually never had to use. There are also some removed enemies and bosses, and only one con will be on the screen at a time. Instead, they will stay in some other dimension or something until the current con is hit, and then they teleport in and take over. This is similar to what happens in the Donkey Kong Land games, and I have no qualms about it. As a final, quite obvious note, there are also less levels. What do you expect? And because I don't have a segue, let's talk about the gameplay. It's actually pretty amazing, and I'm being totally serious here. This isn't me saying that it's good by pirate standards or that I'll let it pass because I find the game novel, but because it's actually fun. The levels are all well designed and some quite memorable. In particular, this level with all the claptraps has really stuck with me since I finished it. The controls are also good, though a tad bit different from the source material. The Earth seems to have a much stronger gravitational pull, which makes your jumps much shorter and quicker. This is fine, however, because all the levels have been made with this in mind, so no jump seems impossible. Which reminds me, the game's difficulty is pretty even as well. You begin with 25 lives, and though this may seem like a lot, you will quickly find that the levels are not only well designed, but also very challenging. The aforementioned claptrap level, for example, was particularly difficult, but not unbeatable, so that when you do beat it, the feeling of satisfaction is even greater. Maybe that's why it resonated with me so much. As far as the boss battles go, they are pretty much the same besides the lack of the Xener boss. The only other real big difference is the lack of the fake-out ending from the SNES version. Instead, we go straight into the credits, which is something I've actually never seen from a bootleg game before. Here we can see that a total of 8 people worked on this game. I find that extremely impressive. Moving on from gameplay, I want to briefly talk about the music, because this is some really excellent stuff. Not as good as the SNES version for sure, I mean, how could it be? But a good effort was still put in here, and here are a few of my favorites. final point I'd like to cover about this game is the feeling it gave me. As you might imagine, there aren't really any guides or a lot of information out there about this game in general. So in the course of playing it, I experienced something akin to the wonder and mystery I felt when playing the original Donkey Kong Country. That was before the times of high-speed internet and YouTube, where you never really knew what to expect in the next area, and it really felt like an adventure. So for that, I'm really thankful I found it. In conclusion, the game is actually pretty great. Something that fans of old school platformers may want to check out. Alright, this has been Mike the Gamer Guy, and I'll see you next time.